Welcome back to Discovering Life After 50 with Yvonne. First and foremost, thanks very much for your engagement, your comments, and truly means a lot, can't tell you. Truly means a lot. That episode, for some weird reason, went compared to the rest. But it really means a lot, truly. So we'll carry on for last week in regards to whether should we send kids back to school. You know, I was thinking about it all week because it kind of preyed in my mind a wee bit, the rights and the wrongs, and people generally do the best they can with the tools they've got. And it made me think about a lot of things, but there's still a lot of things that shouldn't happen or shouldn't have happened. And I dare say there's a hell of a lot of worse things going on in the world, to be perfectly honest with you, from then and now. But this channel's obviously about my lived experience. I can't speak for anyone else. And I remember the night that it happened, we got a chap at the door. The day went as normal as any other day. Up, kids went to school, did it, home for lunchtime, home at time for school. Mum, is it tatties or chips? The usual. But my mum, my dad and my sister had a doctor's appointment that night. My dad had something wrong with his feet, I think it was. And my sister had something wrong with her ears. So time is marching on and I'm going, God, they're cutting it fine for the doctors. Nobody appeared, and then the door went, and it was my dad's work colleague stroke friend to tell me that my dad had been in an accident. So you can imagine the hysteria. So long story short, he decided, the phone went, he told me that, hysteria, the phone went, and it was my auntie, and they had passed it on their way home and phoned up to see, because obviously there's more than one Wella van. That's where my dad worked at the time, Wella. Van on the road. And they went home and phoned the house to speak to my mum. And of course I answered the phone, hysterical. My dad's been in an accident. I thought I heard the dog barking now. My dad's been in an accident. So I told her that my dad's work colleague was in the house. And she said, put him on. I put him on. And they said what they said, and he came off the phone and said, right, we have to get into your neighbours. I have to take you into your neighbours. And I'm like, all right. So we all shuttles next door and goes into the neighbours. But I ran across the path in the back door, in the back gate, up the path into the back door of my adopted mum, and battered her door, and because it was locked. And she worked at that time at, I think it was about 5 to 7 at night or something like that. And I banged on her door. She couldn't find her key, so she had to walk all the way from the front, all the way around the back, and told her hysterically what was going on and what had happened, so she never went to her work. So we all went into the neighbours. We all knew each other. And we were all sitting in the neighbours, and then the door went, and I can remember me sitting in the neighbours talking to them and that, and I'm just like, I wish they would hurry up and tell us what's happening. I mean, I should really go to the hospital to be with my mum. She'll be frantic about my dad, blah, blah, blah. Then the door went, and it was my two aunties. And one of them had been in hospital having a hysterectomy, and the two of them came in. And I could hear they'd shut the kitchen door. When they went to answer the door, they'd shut the kitchen door, and I could hear the murmuring voices. And I was like, what's going on? What's happening? And I got up and I opened the door and I walked into the hall, and I could see my auntie that had been in hospital. And I'm like, what are you doing at a hospital? And she could hardly walk. Well, back then hysterectomies weren't as great as they are now. No great, but surgery was a big thing back then. There was no such thing as keyhole. Anyway, so we all came into the dining room, and everybody's looking at each other, and my auntie turned and says, look, I've got bad news for yous. It's no good news at all. Your mum and dad were in the van and they're gone. Neither of them survived. So you can imagine the hysteria. It was hysterical. It was awful. My brother took to his heels and ran out the house. Can't remember how we got him back or what happened with that. And aye, it was the most awful time. We all ended up back in our own house. And my mum's pal, my mum's other pal, obviously either my adopted mum or my neighbour, phoned her, because they were all pals, to tell her what had happened. And her man came up, and my sister and I ended up going home with her. And she only stayed 10 minutes up the road, but we ended up going home with her anyway. Still regret that to this day, because we left my brother in the house. So then, obviously, you know all the story about the funeral and everything being in the Wednesday. We came home on the Sunday. I went out for a walk on the Sunday night. When I get back, my auntie for London was in. My mum's two great aunties were there. It was like Piccadilly Circus. And I went for a walk. I went up to my best pal's, which happened to be my adopted mum's niece. I went up to my best pal's and sat with her, just breaking my heart for, don't know how long I sat there. And then went back down the road. My brother was still sitting in the same position behind the louver doors in the dining room at the radiator, but at the heating. It was blow-air heating we had at the time, and he was sitting there when we left, and he was still sitting there when I come back. And then that was fine. So then the funeral, you know the situation with the funeral. I wasn't allowed to go. Fast forward a few weeks to the decision was getting made, what was going to happen with us. And I get told, come home for school for your lunch, we need to talk to you. Alright, so I goes to school, comes home at lunchtime, gets a bowl of soup put down in front of me. And my auntie's like, look, she says, you're the oldest. Yep. So you're going to need to make the decision for both yourself and your brother and sister. And I'm like, decision about what? What do you mean? What am I making a decision about? And she says, well, you've got two choices really. You and Natalie come and stay with me, and Alan goes and stays with your other auntie, or you get me home. And I vaguely remember kind of sniggering a wee bit and going, well, it's obvious what I'm going to pick then, innit? It's not really a choice. We'll need to obviously go our separate ways, and we come to you and he goes to her. I just find that, I'm not saying they've done anything wrong, right? They've obviously dealt with the situation the way they best knew how. But, and like I said, you've no idea the scars that's left. You've literally no idea the scars that's left. I'm 50, I nearly swore there. I'm 59 nearly, and that still rankles. The funeral still rankles. Do I hold a grudge about it? No. But it's still painful. It's just still painful. And so when the decision was made, and then we all moved on, we went there, he went there, and we just had to go on with it. And do you know, there was not one single person phoned and asked if we were getting looked after okay, if we were happy enough, if we were getting treated okay, if we were getting fed. Not one single person. It was like, as if, well, you're moving in with family, off you pop, bye now. And that was just like, that's what it was like. And even then, it's phenomenal to think. It still mind boggles me that, oh well, if you're going to live with family, it's fine. It's no fine. It's not fine. Probably for 80% of the population, that God help them, if something like that happens to them, that would be okay. But there'll be the 20% where that maybe wouldn't have been. And you've no idea how many times I've thought in the last 45 years, if I'd picked the other option, what would have happened to us. But anyway, we didn't. And then about a year and a half later, the house, my mum and dad's house, lay empty for a year and a half. And I remember we get told it was sold. I was heartbroken again. Heartbroken. And I was like, well, I need to go. I want to get into the house before you hand the keys over. So my brother and I get brought up with my uncle to see the house before. And I was grounded at the time because I get caught smoking. Anyway, and look at that was all I was doing back then, by the way. So that we both went up to see that, and as soon as I walked in the front door, I was heartbroken all over again. And there was so many things I wasn't allowed to take from the home, cuddly toys and stuff like that. Just things that we weren't allowed to take that was ours. Well, they didn't have the space for it, so I suppose it was understandable. But the things that we lost, it wasn't just for parents. You know, my mum and dad, my mum was 34, my dad was 36. I'm 59 this year, and I find that incredibly painful that they were so young when that happened. They were only kids themselves. And I'm just like, I was nearly 16 when the house gets sold, and I kept thinking, I could move into this house in September and I'll take my brother and sister with me. I'll just look after them. And the fact of the matter is, we wouldn't have been alone because the neighbours would have looked after us and helped us 100%. So, but anyway, it didn't happen that way. It just didn't happen that way. And see, every single thing like that happens, it leaves scars, right? Now, it's up to you as an individual whether you carry these scars like a shield or whether you carry them like a sword. I suppose I've went the shield way, not a sword, because I'm not angry about it. I don't think, but it's obviously still painful, right? All these years later, because I can't change it. And I'm a firm believer in stop worrying about the things you can't change. And I can't change any of that. But it's my history. It's my story. It's my learned, lived experience. And it's bloody painful. And it's been painful since that night. It's been painful. And I remember I was grounded that day. We went up to the house. And I remember he says to me this, I was in such a state, I was hysterical. And I was in such a state, he says to me, right, be home for 4 o'clock or whatever, right? Be back home for 4 o'clock, and he'll let me go out to my adopted mum's. And I ran away from him, and I ran away in there, and I ran in her back door, and the two sat in tears. She was heartbroken as well. And the two just sat in tears. And then I remember we had a conversation one night. I went up one night and I says to her, I'm coming up with a bottle of vodka. And keep in mind, she was only 34 herself, 35 at the time herself. And it was after I'd turned 18, right? I was 18. And I says to her, I'm coming up with a bottle of vodka. And this was like it was about 2 years later. And I remember saying to her, you know, I had a dream. And she went, you had a dream? I went, aye, after my mum and dad. And she went, all right. She went, so did I, weirdly. She went, what was that about? I says to her, it was weird. I says, me and you were standing in your middle room, which was my adopted sister's room at the time. I says, and I was standing looking at the window with you. I says, and we seen my dad pushing my ma in a wheelchair up the path towards the house. And she honestly turned around and says to me, I can't believe this. And I went back, she went, I had exactly the same dream. And I went, no way. And she went, I absolutely had the same dream. And I was just like, and we were shouting at them. And we were angry with them for lying that they had died and they hadn't. And my mum was trying to say, well, look, we didn't know how this was going to pan out. And I was like, I couldn't have cared how it was a dream, right? But she had the same one. And her and I are like, we're just like kindred spirits. I'm not her daughter, but I'm like her daughter. She's in the female world. She's the best friend I've ever had, and I've got a few best friends. Our niece is one of my best pals, and has been since I was 5. And I've got a few, right? But she is the best human being I know, and I thank God every day for her. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be me. But I often wonder if I had been allowed, if they'd held on to that house until I was 16, what would have happened? And I know for a fact we would have been fine because we had them. We had them. But it wasn't to happen. So the whole point of this is to say, it's 15 minutes are in, right, so I'm going to wind it up now. Is there other people out there, if you're watching this and you're you're a me, or someone like me, or maybe you're on the other side and you're the other members of the story, go to inbox me if you can relate to the story and let me know what your story is, because I find it tragic if this is still happening in this day and age to other children that are just forgotten in the system, that are not followed up on. There's no, oh well, they're going to live with family, off you pop. So who knows, maybe we can support each other. So if you're watching this and you understand and you've experienced this, let me know. Inbox me, like, share, whatever needs to be done with YouTube, and make sure you subscribe. It's free. And let's try and reach as many people as possible in regards this kind of story. I mean, my whole channel's not going to be about death and losing parents, but it's pretty emotive still to this day. It takes me all my time not to go hysterical. So subscribe, share it out with your family and friends, and let's see if we can reach others in a similar situation, even people now that are going through it, and let's see if we can support them. That would be a fantastic thing to happen from this channel, and only really just since I started talking about this in the last 2 episodes, I feel the urge and the need to reach out. So if that's you, or you know someone, please give them my email address and inbox me. Subscribe to the channel, get it out there, and help me get it out there for others to see, hear. Perhaps we'll help someone, even if we just help one person. I'm going to leave it there for this week. Thanks so much for your engagement. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch. And Anne, Jade, and Sally, thank you so much. Thank you. I'll see you next week.